Hello and welcome to this episode of GLI Live. My name is Donna Cryer, and I am the founder and CEO of the Global Liver Institute. And I have the distinct privilege of being your host for this very special episode of GLI Live, of our program. Uh, it is very special because the topic is every liver, every time, best practices in organ donation and recovery. And as most of the listeners and watchers of this show hopefully know by now, I am blessed to be 26 years and counting post-liver transplant. And part of the impetus for the entire creation of the Global Liver Institute is so that other patients can have access to the same level of innovation and care that saved my life and sustains me today. And innovations in organ donation and recovery is very much a part of that story. So to share that story and to tell that story with me, I have a fantastic guest from Mid-America Transplant, Diane Brockmeyer and Kevin Lee. Welcome.
Thank you.
Great to be here.
Fantastic. So, we got a lot of attention and caught people's notice when we were testifying before the House Oversight and Reform Subcommittee. But that was not the first time that I have spoken out and been involved in organ transplant and donation policy. I have higher time since my transplant and helped. I was one half of the federal affairs team at UNOS. We've been working on these issues for years, quite successfully in a bipartisan way. And so, one of the reasons for the show is, people had perhaps a misunderstanding that I was anti-OPO, which is the furthest thing from the case. I wouldn't be alive today if wonderful folks like you hadn't worked so hard in such a professional and dedicated fashion to provide and facilitate the gift of life coming to a transplant recipient like myself. And so my family and I owe you all a huge debt of gratitude. And so I wanted to make sure that we used our spotlight to highlight those of you who are doing such a great job and performing to such high standards and bringing such creativity and hard work and innovation to that. And in my conversations that I've had, I really have not been more inspired than after my conversation with the two of you. And so I'm just so grateful that you all here today.
Thank you.
So maybe just starting with first Diane and then Kevin, tell us what an OPO does and how you got to the point where you were running one.
I started in this field, Donna, over 35 years ago, and we're very appreciative of the opportunity to share Mid-America's story with you. An OPO is an organization that has a designated service area, a designated territory, in which we partner with donor hospitals to ensure that every potential donor family has the opportunity to honor their loved one through the gift of organ or tissue donation. And those partnerships with those hospitals are critical, and relationships with those physicians are critical to allow us access to speak with families at probably, by all accounts, a pretty horrific time in their life. But they have this really unique and special opportunity to create a legacy for their loved one that is very long lasting. And in your case, 20 plus years. So, and they take a lot of solace from that to know that they can, in often cases, turn an unthinkable tragedy into a celebration of life for another individual. So we work with those families. We accompany their loved one into the operating room with the surgeons to help recover the organs. They go through special preservation techniques, and then we allocate those organs according to a national placement list to ensure that the organs go into their intended recipients. And that list is controlled by a national system where patients, based on the length of time they've waited, the severity of their illness, are ranked in hierarchical order and by geography against the donors that we have the privilege to work with. So in a nutshell, that's what an OPO does.
Thank you. That was so helpful. So Kevin, how did you come to this great work?
Yeah, so I, like many of our team members here, was touched by a donation. A good friend of mine back in 2014, his wife authorized tissue donation when he passed away unexpectedly. And I was so inspired by the mission and the ability to impact so many lives, not only, as Diane mentioned, through building legacies with donor families, but then also this ripple or butterfly effect from donation. To think that those who receive these amazing gifts, they go on to have first days of school. They are able to celebrate holidays with family. They celebrate Thanksgiving, and their families get to know them and enjoy them as well. It just was an inspiring mission to be part of. So I've been here about 5 years, which is a hot second compared to many of our senior team members who, like Diane, have been here for 3 decades. But I think that speaks to how motivating this work is, not only here at Mid-America Transplant, but at the other OPOs across the country. There are similar stories of long tenured employees that wake up each and every day knowing that they have the opportunity to build legacies of life with donor families, but also this responsibility to ensure each and every day we take somebody off of that waiting list.
That's fantastic. And I know that in conversations amongst ourselves and with some of the other high performing OPOs who wanting to strive better, we have this sort of evolving common vision to be able to eliminate the list in at least for liver patients, since that list is so much smaller than the kidney transplant list. There are 12,000 people who are waiting for a liver, many of whom are pediatric autoimmune cases who would have extremely high success rate, like myself, if transplanted. And so, rather than sort of having these allocation fights back and forth, if we could just really focus on the donation, I feel that we could all work together and eliminate the list of people waiting for a liver transplant.
We would agree with you, Donna, and we would also say to you that for our organization, some of the success is from just doing those basic things. The title of your show, Every Liver, Every Time, it's kind of an inspirational thought for our staff as they get those calls on a daily basis. And so we go in to work with those families with the predisposition that there will be a gift that's usable, that a liver or the kidneys or one organ or tissue would be able to be transplanted from the donor. And so looking at that and the passion that our staff goes into that with, and that starts from the point that the first call happens, that we respond, we're out the door. If you don't go out the door to serve that family and partner with that hospital, the donation is never going to occur. So some of those basic principles really help ensure that we believe as an organization we're doing what we can to maximize all of those precious opportunities.
And we appreciate that, attention to the basics. My father was, a baseball player, and we also, talked about my godson, who is now playing for, little team, based where you are, and so running all the bases, going to the basics, hitting, catching, throwing, doing all the fundamental things right is certainly important. But you all have been very creative and innovative, and have made major investments to be able to take care of donors and to drive your high recovery rates. And so, Kevin, maybe would you like to talk about some of the innovative investments you've made that people may not even understand are part of the the OPO sort of responsibilities, or part of your work?
Absolutely. And I think probably the most notable one that Diane brought to life in her tenure here at Mid-America Transplant was the development of the nation's first donor recovery unit, or organ recovery unit. Historically, and in many places of the United States today, when a courageous donor family authorizes organ donation, the OPO team comes into the hospital and they manage that donor there at the hospital facility. And there are competing interests that are taking place within that hospital environment. Back in 2000, 2001, under Diane's leadership, we took the step as an organization to step forward and say, what if we built our own recovery center, a donor recovery unit, where with the family's permission, we asked them for authorization to transport their loved one who had been declared brain dead by the hospital, who had a time of death and a death certificate, but was still on a ventilator, to our facility, where our team of registered nurses and critical care doctors continued to manage that donor there to ensure that we could maximize donation each and every time. That was successful in concept to the point that in 2007, we built a facility 1 mile from our two largest transplant centers in St. Louis and 3 miles from our other two transplant centers. So we cut down the time of travel for gifts, organs that are recovered within our facility here. And this year, we're on pace to have served 2,500 donors in our facility. Again, that couldn't happen without the generosity of donor families and with a lot of education and collaboration from our hospital partners. But by bringing those donors to our facility, we believe we could provide them with better care and also drive costs out of the system. Oftentimes, our ability to manage that case in our facility has reduced the cost structure by 30 to 35%, which we've passed along to our hospital partners and to the patients who are the recipients. So it's been an incredible journey to be here in the donor care unit. It is so inspirational to see our team take such loving but clinical care of these donors, these patients, these heroes within our facility here. And today, I believe, Diane, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe there are 10 other OPOs that are either operating donor recovery units, including our friends in Kansas City who are currently building a donor recovery unit at Midwest Transplant Network.
That's correct.
That's fantastic to hear. And so how do you share these, best practices amongst OPOs and help everybody get to, their next level from wherever they're starting?
I think one of the opportunities we've had, Donna, it's a pretty small network. There are only 57 organizations like ours across the country. So we've had the opportunity to informally share at national meetings on one-on-one opportunities in smaller settings about things that work for us. And using the donor care unit as an example, we've given the playbook, back to your baseball analogy, we've given that playbook from questions hospitals might ask, how do you address this special care unit with families, all the way through to what types of supplies you would need. So we've given that book away, so to speak, for anyone that was interested. So we've hosted lots of visitors here to see how it works. But we want to make sure that while this has been a remarkably successful practice for us, as Kevin said, more organs transplanted and cost out of the system, that it's something that's in some cases is appropriate for others to replicate. It's not the answer for everyone, depending on their geography and their locality. But for us, it's been a successful endeavor, not only a huge satisfier for the donor family. That's all we do here. It's a specialty center. And so there aren't delays because a surgery's been bumped or the trauma team got called in. So we can really focus on the timeline for the donor family, as well as accommodating the downstream needs for the recipient by optimizing the work that goes on here.
How has COVID affected your work and your relationships with hospitals? For hospitals who were treating, COVID and non-COVID patients, and there was a slowdown in transplants and donors. So how has COVID affected your work and what is it looking like leading out of this pandemic?
Kevin, you want to take that one?
Sure. So I think, like most of the nation, when the pandemic really took hold of our country in March of 2020, we saw an immediate slowdown in our ability to engage with our clinical partners in the hospitals, but also with families as well. And certainly a positive COVID-19 test is a rule out for organ and tissue donation. But as we relied upon our relationship building skills in the foundational relational work we had done with our hospital partners, we quickly, like many other OPOs, continued to pick up the phone to round with our clinical nursing leaders at our community hospitals at least twice a day, if not more. We learned new things about physicians in the hospitals. Some of them prefer to be texted. Some of them prefer the traditional phone call as well. And to ensure that donation continued to take place and that families were provided with the opportunity to build a legacy of life. So really within 6 weeks of the pandemic changing how we operated on a day-to-day basis, we entered May of 2020 and saw a milestone number of organs transplanted for our region. We reached a 35-year high of 91 life-saving organs available for transplant. And that was really due to the flexibility of our team and so those clinical hospital partners working with those families to ensure this opportunity existed. I would say that the most challenging piece of this has been because of COVID-19, hospitals have had to restrict their visitor policies. And so it's been tough for us as an OPO team to build rapport with these donor families at this time of immense stress that has been amplified by their inability to be in the hospital room in large numbers. So we walk the fine line of respecting what our community hospitals need to do for their teams and the patients they serve, but also wanting to be there to support and advocate the family. So we found that we've been talking to more families on the phone. We've even FaceTime with families. We've had family meetings in hospital parking lots where we've asked the physicians to come out and speak to the family with us. So we've tried to remain flexible and adaptable. This past Friday, just within this past week, we had a restrictive visitor policy and a family was unable to meet with their family. And so it doesn't happen often here, Donna, but we did allow the family to come to the donor care unit and then in groups of 2 visit with their loved one and have the opportunity to say that final goodbye. So flexibility has been key for everybody across the country, and we just remain grateful for these families who continue to support donation and transplantation.
Wow, that's amazing. A huge challenge on top of something that's already a very sensitive, difficult situation. So, what do you say to donor families who have concerns about the donation process, who are worried that their loved one wasn't taken care of, or who don't believe that their organ will go to fair use and equitably to transplant recipients? What is your message to families who are in a position to donate but are skeptical of the process or have deep concerns, mistrust of the medical system itself?
I think you raise a key issue, Donna, and certainly at every opportunity when we're speaking in the community, we encourage people to indicate what their own personal wishes are through registration on either the state or national registry to indicate their willingness to become a donor, like at the license office is one place that many sign up. But I think what we try to ensure is that this is a situation where families have essentially lost all control. They're losing their loved one. They really don't have an opportunity to have a lot of input in some of those clinical decisions appropriately, being managed by physician teams. But what we do have is the chance to provide them with good, solid information. We share with them exactly what's going to happen in the process so they understand it. We provide them with a card or an opportunity to make a special request about a moment of silence for their loved one in the operating room. Would you like us to read a special scripture or a poem? Would you like us to play a special type of music? We make sure that they meet our team while we're at the hospital so they know that somebody that they've met is going to be with their loved one in the ambulance ride back to our building in this facility while we continue to care for them. So we want to make sure that they know that there's an extension of the care that's been provided at the hospital by the compassionate group of nurses that we have here. And we also have members of our team that are family support specialists that actually walk that journey with them, keeping them apprised of the timeline, what's going on, what time can we anticipate going to the operating room, all those kind of key pieces. So their loved one, they're made well aware of what's going on with their loved one, because it's a bit of a process people don't truly understand. And so what can we do to make sure that they have good information about how their loved one's being cared for and where we are in the process? And then the other point too that we try to ensure is that to give them a bit of a glimpse about the types of people, the disease conditions perhaps that someone might need a transplant for. So to give them a little bit of a snapshot about the types of people that may be impacted by this heroic gift they're going to make. And many of the families know someone that's either had a transplant, is waiting on a transplant. And so when they have a personal connection, it makes the message even more compelling to know I can help somebody like Donna, or I can help somebody like Donna's friend that waited for a liver transplant. So I think that's been a powerful message as transplant's been more widely adopted across the U.S.
Do you have transplant recipients who participate in a speakers bureau or who help you share that message and families so they can see sort of the other side of things?
Yes. Kevin, you want to talk a bit about some of the volunteers?
Yeah, we have 200 trained volunteers that support community education throughout the 84 counties we serve. We serve Southern Illinois, Eastern Missouri, and Northeast Arkansas. And so they come together to do outreach on a regular basis. Many of them are donor families, but there are also probably about 25-30% are recipients. Many of them are liver recipients, as we have 2 strong liver transplant programs here in St. Louis. And there's nothing more powerful than hearing from a recipient. Diane and I have developed a very close relationship with one of our volunteers, Donna, who got a liver transplant 13 years ago. And she talks about how she was able to see both her girls get married and her grandsons be born and take them to the Cardinals game, just to play off of our baseball theme today, and really enjoy those things about life. And so that really humanizes this whole process for many people in the public, and it makes it so much more personal for them that they are more open, I would say, to hearing this message as well. I think certainly, and I know we're talking about livers today, and you referenced earlier the kidney list being so long, often our conversations are, do you know anybody who's on dialysis? And with dialysis impacting so many Americans, there often is that familial connection or extended family connection. And certainly people understand the stress of being on dialysis and what a great gift that is to take someone off of dialysis.
Absolutely. It's so liberating to talk to someone who has been on dialysis for years, using hours of their time for 3 times a week. And now they can spend those times taking care of their family or going to school. It really is not only just a gift of life, a gift of freedom that people are giving when they are kidney donors. And it is just so striking.
I think the other point that needs to be made too is that when we're talking about the liver is such a phenomenal organ that we have seen the timeline for liver donation extend, in the sense that much older individuals are able to successfully donate healthy livers and have them transplanted into recipients, not only here in the Midwest, but obviously across the country as well. And so it's not uncommon. In fact, it is common for us each and every year to recover livers from people in their 70s that are successfully transplanted into people in their 40s, 50s, and 60s. And you think about it, that liver has the opportunity to be 100. And for me, and to fully confess, I'm a non-clinical individual, but to think that the liver could live to be 100 and live 2 lives, so to speak, is really incredible to think about. But we're moved and motivated at Mid-America Transplant sometimes when we visit with patients and their families, and the patient is in their 70s and they have been declared brain dead. And we'll even say there's a slim chance we could place this liver. And a couple of times the daughter has grabbed the arm of our family support specialist and said, my mother has been talking about being an organ donor for 30 years. Wow. Please try. And when those stars align and the clinical team can make that happen in the transplant center, it's clinically appropriate for them to accept that liver. What a great story. And the connectivity of humanity here in this entire process of a perfect stranger helping another perfect stranger live their best possible life. that's really motivating too as well. And I'm not sure that was the question you asked, Donna, but I just had to work.
The best. That was fantastic. That's fantastic. One question that I get a lot is from recipients is how many recipients, are connected to their donor. Write a letter. It's an anonymous process. Normally, you write a letter and hope that they want to be connected. And we've heard some fabulous stories of matching. Certainly not something that everybody chooses for a lot of individual reasons. But how often does that happen, and what do those sort of donor recipient reunions look like?
Kevin, you want to talk about one of the more recent ones we've had?
Sure. So I think there's what we do. I'll just explain the process. Is we really each party, the donor family and the recipient, can write a letter. They send that to the organ procurement organization, and if the stars align and they've both indicated on a form that they're open to receiving correspondence from the other party, then we start exchanging mail for a minimum of a 12-month period before we then propose that there might be a face-to-face meeting moving forward. There's a number of reasons we do that. One is the recipients often tell us that they are struggling with some guilt and some other key components moving forward, and we want to make sure they have time to process that. And we also want to make sure that the donor family has time to begin to process their grief. I don't know that you ever fully process grief. It's more of a life journey, and so we want to make sure that it's appropriate there. And then over a period of time, after that year's there, they may extend or exchange letters directly. And then they may align or set up a meeting that takes place. Sometimes we help facilitate that. Sometimes it's in our boardroom here at Mid-America Transplant if it's appropriate. And so that process takes place. To our knowledge, we interact with those maybe 2 or 3 dozen a year. I think what's interesting is with social media, we see that people are often connecting much sooner than that year via Facebook. And so that can be positive, and it can also be challenging as well. And so I think one of the challenging examples there is the recipient is so excited to receive this gift. They have figured out via Facebook who the donor might be, and they invite the donor family to come forward and meet them right away. And the donor family's not right there. Or conversely, the donor family invites the organ recipient to the memorial services for the donor. And that's a really tough situation. So we do ask people to take their time and really allow the process to work itself out. A few years ago at Donor Day at the ballpark with the St. Louis Cardinals, we did have a heart recipient who was there, and he was at our kiosk, kind of seeing what we had and what we were talking about there before the game started. And he bumped into a donor family who had T-shirts identifying their donor and his age. And so the recipient took the brave step of approaching the family and asking a few more clarifying questions. And then this family, he asked them if they would like to hear their brother or son's heart there at the ballpark. And so it did go viral. The NBC affiliate locally picked that up, but they had everyone coming up and listening to the heart. And it was just tears everywhere, tears of joy, tears of sorrow, tears of excitement, this interconnectivity of humanity. It was really inspiring to our staff. Most of our staff are crying too, and we get to be part of this on a regular basis. But it still gets you.
It's amazing. So, because of your dedication and commitment and high performance, continued innovation, recipients in your area likely don't feel a need to multi-list or to go to other places in the country to list at a hospital and have a reasonable chance of getting an organ, in a time frame, before they get too sick or if it's too late. What do you say, or how can you help to policymakers or to other OPO leaders so that every patient, wherever they are in the country, can have the opportunity to live in a geography with the highest performing OPO. What do we need to know, and what can we do to support, more folks like you?
I think one of the key elements, Donna, is to ensure that the OPO leadership has shored up the basics, right? So, do you have good relationships with your donor hospitals and transplant centers? Do you respond when the phone rings? Do you have staff that you can dispatch in immediately to meet the needs of the family and the clinical care team? While that sounds like an oversimplification, some of those early basic steps are truly the ones that make a huge difference. And I think the other thing is the environment that organ procurement organizations work in is just to continue to share successes. We benchmark against people that perform higher than us. Kevin mentioned our neighbors to the west in Kansas City. So we're constantly looking for ways that we take the commitment to get better every day very seriously, because every day we get better, it means more people come off the list. So our work is about staying committed to mission. It's about making sure that you're caring for the partners and the donor family as a collaborator, and that you're moving things forward to ensure that every opportunity happens for every family when it's possible. So just ensuring that some of those, that the phone always rings, to all the way to making sure you go on site. Some of those basic principles are easily transferable. And I think the other thing we've really tried to instill in our workforce is the mindset that assume everyone has a gift they can make, versus the attitude that, I don't know, they're a little older, or they've got a highly complicated medical history. Is that positivity and that assumption that we're going to do everything we can to recover any organ, every liver, on every opportunity. So I think it's just the commitment, it's the culture, it's the dedication to ensure that you've got the basics in place, and it's continuing to strive to get better every day.
Thank you so much. I couldn't end on a better note. I thank you both for your time today. I thank you for your lifetime of professional and personal commitment. And thank you to everybody who watched today. If you would like to find other episodes on similar or not so similar topics, you can find them all on our Global Liver Institute YouTube channel, Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. To everyone, stay well, stay connected.